Okay, a proportion states that two ratios are equal. So normally ratios are going to be written in the fraction form in this. And we can use ratio tables or cross products or tape diagrams or unit rates or double number lines to solve proportions. What we're going to focus on is we're going to look at unit rates and ratio tables. So the first one says, at the Cocoa Bean Chocolate Factory, 2 pounds of their world-famous chocolate fudge sell for $1. And we're going to use the unit rate to fill in the missing information. We're going to use this same problem in a variety of situations to be able to help us. So the first thing they told us was that 2 pounds of their world-famous fudge sells for $1. So I went ahead and filled in that information that 2 pounds sells for $1. So what we have to do is we've got to figure out what is the unit rate, meaning what would 1 pound sell for? So we would say 2 divided by 2, and that's how we ended up with 1 pound. Well, we know what we do to the top, we've got to do to the bottom. So we're going to take $1 and we divide it by 2, and that tells us that, hey, that's 50 cents. So we now know the unit rate is 50 cents. We can take this and we can now apply it to fill in the missing values. So the first thing we're asked about is 3 pounds. To get from 1 to 3, we would say 1 times 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing on the bottom. We're going to say 50 cents times 3 is going to give us $1.50. And then if we were to look at to get from 1 to 4, that's going to be 1 times 4. So we come down here and we say 50 cents times 4, that's going to give us $2. Now we can apply this the same way to fill in if we have the bottom. If we know that to get from 50 cents to $3, we would say 50 cents times 6. Then when we come up top, we're going to say 1 times 6, and that's how we're going to get that $3 would buy us 6 pounds of fudge. I imagine you're running out of room like I am, so to get 5, we would say to get $5, we would have to say 50 cents times 10, which means that we would then say 1 times 10, and that's how we'd get that $5 would buy us 10 pounds of fudge. To get 11 pounds of fudge, that's 1 times 11. So to figure out the cost, it would be 50 cents times 11, which we know would be $5.50. So we found our unit rate, and then we were able to use that to help us fill in whatever information we needed for any amount of fudge or any cost. Now, let's take a look at page 11. If we didn't want to make that whole big ratio table, we could use the information we've been given to calculate for various amounts. So for example, how much fudge can you buy with $5? So again, we were told that 2 pounds of fudge costs $1. So we could say to get from 2 to 1, we would say 2 divided by 2. And we would say $1 divided by 2. And that's how we find out that 1 pound equals 50 cents. And then we could say, all right, to get from 50 cents up to $5, that's saying 0.50 times 10, which means we would say 1 times 10. And so we would find out, oh, $5 gives us 10 pounds of fudge. But what if we wanted to just say, how do you get from 1 to 5? We can say 1 times 5, meaning we could then say 2 times 5. Notice we get the same answer of 10. So in either case, we either redid the unit rate or we just took the amount that we knew, we were able to apply it and find a missing value. So instead of finding an unlimited amount of missing values, we found one specific value. Now, if we didn't want to make that big old chart and go back to the unit rate, we can look here and say, hey, I know that I could say 1 times 5, and then I could say 2 times 5. And we know that that's going to give us our 10 pounds of fudge that we keep finding. But now what if we were to say, I'm going to do 1 times 2, $1 times 2. Would that work here by saying $5 times 2? Is that going to be 10 pounds? Yeah. So we were able to use the ratio going right to left to figure out that 10 pounds of fudge, or we would be able to use the ratio up and down to find that 10 pounds of fudge. Either way, we ended up finding out $5 is going to give us 10 pounds of fudge. So now, if one ratio is known, the way we knew that 2 pounds of fudge costs $1, we're able to use this to calculate a missing value in a similar ratio. The thing you need to remember is the numerators must have a relationship and the denominators must have a relationship, and then each ratio must have a relationship. Okay? The easiest way to do this is to pay attention to the units. So, if 2 ratios are equivalent, the cross products should be equivalent. And this is why you do things like cross multiplication and when you solve a proportion, and that's why it works. So if we're setting up these ratios, we can set it up that we know we're going to have money over pounds. Remember that money always comes first, and that's a very helpful thing for us. So now when we read through the problem, how many pounds of fudge can we buy for $5 if we can get 2 pounds of fudge for $1? We look at things and say, well, how many pounds of fudge? That's going to be a P because we want to know. Can we buy for $5? Well, that's the money, so that's got to go up top. If 2 pounds of fudge if we can get 2 pounds of fudge for $1. So notice that we're setting up our ratio table, it just looks a little bit differently. So once again, we can look at things and say, I can do 1 times 5, and then I can do 2 times 5. Or I can do 1 times 2 and 5 times 2. Either way, I'm going to end up getting that P is going to be 10 pounds. And I knew this by looking at my ratios and looking at the relationships, either horizontally or vertically.